All right, everyone. I'm making a quick video here to talk a little bit about the history of machines reportedly taking our jobs. And before I start this, I would like to preface by saying these historical anecdotes, the tone behind them is sort of a generalization. I want to explain to you guys that the fear we have now, or the fear someone has now, is not unfettered. It's not for no reason. It's not unreasonable, but it's been around for a long time. And so hopefully my goal is that this gives you guys or whomever is watching this a little bit more ease when they hear any sort of, whether it be fear mongering or legit threats or legit conditional plans on whether this happens or whether you'll have a job. And I just want to show you guys that you're not the first and you're definitely not the last. So let's go back to the 1590s. This is the earliest anecdote, but the next ones are going to be from the 1920s on. So Queen Elizabeth, her economy is threatened by a mechanical sewing machine. And I'll just read a little bit off of here. In the early 1590s, Lord Hudson, a chamberlain of Queen Elizabeth I, brought her an object to consider. It was a stocking, but this stocking was made from a mechanical sewing machine. And this is her reaction to that. I have too much love for my poor people who obtain their bread by the employment of knitting to give my money forward to an invention that will tend to their ruin by depriving them of employment and thus making them beggars. And then from then on to the 19th century, machine-made stockings were at the forefront of the Industrial Revolution. If it wasn't for machine-made sewing machines, mechanical sewing machines, I wouldn't have this sweater. You wouldn't have such and such. We wouldn't have these beautiful warm clothes that we have to the extent in which we have them for the price in which we have them. And so, of course, we couldn't convey this to Queen Elizabeth at the time because we didn't have any anecdotes or frames of reference to give to her, but now we do. So in the 1920s, here we have some newspapers back in that time. We see 1925, 1928, so on and so forth. And I pulled these from Pessimist Archive article, something about robots have always been after your jobs. Okay, in the 1920s, the advent of horseless carriages, the boom in mass production, and other emerging automated technologies in the early 20th century spurred fears about job security and the future of work. So, guys, literally 100 years ago, we've had the same fear. Of course, to a different extent and with different circumstances and different nuances and different technologies, but still, the fear was very similar. And then during a 1922 commencement address at Wellesley College, the president of the Rockefeller Foundation reflected, can education run fast enough to outpace machines? Isn't that crazy? Because we have teachers now saying ChatGPT is ruining students, or how are we going to be able to teach if the student just wants to learn from a chatbot, so on and so forth. So I just want to give you guys some sort of understanding that this has been thought about for a while. Solutions have been proposed, few have been implemented, though some. And I just want to let you guys know that there's no need to fear as though this is the first thing of all time. The fear is completely reasonable, or the concern is completely reasonable, but I want to give you guys an example and frames of reference so you can better articulate and think through these things when you're thinking about them. And I'm sure that's nearly every day. And then as the decade closed, the Times began to editorialize that direct predictions might be taking shape, attributing long lines of jobless people to automation and labeling it a cause of idle hands. And if you've heard any futurists speak recently, or you've heard anybody that has some sort of idea or sentiment about AI, you've probably heard their long term predictions about people not being able to work. There's some of them post AGI economy, so post artificial general intelligence economy, when a lot of jobs are taken or automated, or a lot of tasks rather. What are people going to do? How are they going to find meaning? I know Nick Bostrom, the author of Superintelligence, one of the first people to really highlight P doom, probability of doom because of AGI, and really highlight superintelligence. He has a new book called Deep Utopia. And one of the things, well, I didn't read the book, but I listened to a few podcasts and interviews he had about it. One of the things he talks about is a different sort of lifestyle and framework after AGI. It's going to be more leisurely, it's going to be more focused on transcendence, so on and so forth. In the 1930s, the onset of the Great Depression, accompanied by widespread unemployment, appeared as a grim realization of the previous decade's warnings that automation might lead to widespread joblessness and societal upheaval. And then, upon initial reaction, many of the leading intellectuals instinctively blamed automation. And we see this now. Say certain CEOs, like they lay people off and they say hey, it's because of automation. We saw that in the tech sector last year. Whether it's true or not, I don't know particularly. I'm not in those rooms or boardrooms or conference rooms discussing these things. I'm not an HR representative at a tech company, but I can very much see this, and it's been confirmed here and there. But what they refuse to publicize is that they are rehiring some of the individuals. So, what was initially a reaction, I guess a knee jerk reaction to the thought of what could come, instituted or elicited mass layoffs, some of them being rehired and some of them being shifted within. Because if I lay you off from your position, even if I give you another position within, that's still technically considered a layoff. So if you're a software engineer working on some sort of front end development, that's the interface of a website, the part you scroll, so on and so forth, and I say I don't need that anymore, I have Devin or I have some sort of other automation service to do that, and I lay you off, or I ask you to pivot to another position. Let's say I want you to pivot to AI engineer, ML engineer, machine learning engineer, then that's considered a layoff. All right, so enough with the ramble. In 1931, Einstein attributed the great distress of current times to human dependence on machines, while Keynes identified automation as a significant factor in contemporary economic woes. Okay, I'm going to read this excerpt right here. I don't know if you can see where my mouse is, but my mouse is on the article by Einstein, or the little excerpt. Let me read it real quick. World War III's laid to machines. Discussing the effects of natural science on man's life, Professor Albert Einstein, in a lecture tonight, deplored the fact that the industrial technique, which was meant to serve the world's progress by liberating mankind from the slavery of labor, was now about to overwhelm its creators. He characterized the distress of present times as a result of domination by man made machines, but blamed technique not as much as a lack of organization in economic and social life, the stabilization of which is one of the chief tasks of the present time. Regarding the direct effects of natural sciences upon life, Professor Einstein stressed the philosophic theory of determinism, which he said was almost generally recognized today. So we can see that Einstein had the same idea as many of us. These machines, this AI, well, I'm putting it into current times, this AI is going to alleviate us of a lot of these mundane tasks and free us. But what Einstein refused, or what his extrapolation was, is that now it's overwhelming us and we don't have these jobs anymore. And then, look, on the other side of the screen, we see an article by Henry Ford. These are some amazing people, and I'm really glad that I was able to find their work. So, the rise of recorded sound and its visible impact on musicians was widely reported and offered corroboration to concerns. Well, here's an analogy to present day. We see a lot of writers not really complaining, but rather advocating for their future, given that AI is a pretty good writer. The ever-growing concern prompted Henry Ford to write an op-ed in the New York Times World's Fair edition, defending machines and automation, in which he'd say, "There are those who appear honestly to think that the only way to return idle men to work is to destroy the one thing that makes their jobs possible." He pushed back against attacks on automation, noting that for every job taken, 100 new ones are created, citing his Ford Motor Company as an example. So what Henry Ford is saying, he's saying, if it wasn't for these machines helping my workers out, I wouldn't have as many workers. If it wasn't for these machines that are not taxed helping my workers out, the price of a car would be obscene, and so many less people would have a car. Therefore, so many less people would need to make cars because there's less cars being made. And so let me read an excerpt from the article. Though multitudes are unaware of it, inventive genius keeps pace with human need. There is no stopping it. It is instinct in man's nature. And that's a sentiment carried by a lot of my more ambitious leadership like individuals, saying that we're always going to build, we're always going to innovate. There's no need to pause AI. It would make no sense because people are going to build anyway. 1940s. At the dawn of the 1940s, disagreements emerged between the MIT president and President FDR regarding automation impact on jobs. Compton challenged Roosevelt's warning about the challenge of surplus labor due to increased automation. So, in regards to surplus labor, they're more so saying surplus, like amount of people who can do labor and are unemployed. And then the title of the article is, "Does Machine Displace Men in the Long Run? New studies cited as old argument is renewed over significance of technological unemployment." And we see that today. We see, what are these people going to do? What are these food service people going to do when robotics take over the whole food industry, so on and so forth? And I don't have the perfect solution to that. Although I have ideas, this video is not for that purpose. I just want to show you guys and give you guys a frame of reference for these things. It's very difficult to interpret a situation when you think you're the first and when you think every idea you have is a novel idea for the issue. And it would make no sense to repeat history and to repeat the same exact mistakes we made just because we didn't reflect on the past. History rewrites itself, and I'm literally showing you this video or making this video for you to explain that. That year, Senator Joseph O. Mahoney suggested taxing businesses that utilize above average automation to compensate for tax revenue losses from displaced workers. So, an automation tax. So, let's say, let me explain this to you. So, I have a supermarket down the block from my apartment. And let's say all the butchers were automated. And Superfresh, well, which is, I kind of exploited my docs myself, whatever. Superfresh is making, let's say they make $5,000 a day from the butcher section, the deli section, the cold cuts, whatever, so on and so forth. And each of those people, altogether, they make 2,500. And so now they pay 2,500 one shot for all these tools, and they don't need to pay that salary every month again. And so now every month they should get a tax given that these people aren't working, and now the government has to pay for their unemployment or whatever it may be because Superfresh wanted to save some money. So that's the argument. 1950s. Uncle Sam finds use for automation. Congress has it under investigation is the title of an article from November 17th, 1955. And on the right side, it says the replacement of assembly line workers by Ford Motor Company and the introduction of automatic elevators reignited automation fears. And so I'm sure you guys are looking at this like, this sounds crazy, Ethan. Why are you bringing up automatic elevators? You know they're dumb. Why would you be scared of an elevator? Well, that's what they all say. These people, I'm sure they told people in the 20s, why are you afraid of some mechanical car? Why are you afraid some horseless carriage? It's not a big deal. And those people said something before, and now we're looking at this, and then 50 years from now, we're going to look at why did you guys even do that job anyway? It's so easily automatable. You guys are silly for doing that job. You are ruining someone's life and making them unable to transcend or be spiritual because they had to work so hard to deliver pizza when you could just get an automated taxi to do that. And then again in the 1950s, the title of this article was Promise and Peril of Automation. And I'm sure I can go on Google and find an article right now that unknowingly knew this was written, titled the same exact things. The UN International Labor Organization explored the topic with a New York Times article featuring the director pondering the potential for factories operated solely by machines and controlled by electronic brains. And so, interestingly enough, this has not come out yet on large scale, though it's been heavily implemented. People like Musk, whether you agree with his stance or not, I just want to talk about manufacturing for the second, and this is the one I know the most. The Tesla factories, he tried to overly automate it, and it didn't seem to work out given that they were losing time on certain aspects because the weakest link is what holds you up the most. And some of these machines were having a hard time with really fine details that humans could have done better. So it's almost like we went into the future and bounced back and realizing that the iteration is actually from staying where we are. But on the flip side, Hyundai has a factory in Japan called a micro factory where they're making cars fully autonomously from robots. 24 hours. Overnight, the machines are making cars, not making cars, but assembling cars, and during the day they are too. But that's only a micro factory. And is this going to expand? I would think so. But after listening to several podcasts and lectures on manufacturing, seems like a very difficult challenge. Given that even in the 1950s, a prediction made in the 1950s is still not the case. 1960s and 70s. The election of President Kennedy in 1960 intensified attention on tech unemployment. The administration viewed automation with greater concern, with the U.S. Secretary of Labor warning against workers being relegated to a slag heap. Isn't that interesting? A slag heap. And they're talking about this in 1960s and 70s. And now we're saying the same thing. What are we going to do with all these unemployed and now educated individuals? Back then, the unemployed people may have been, I hate using this term, but let's say less educated in more professional or knowledge work. But it seems as though nowadays, everyone hears plumbers, electricians are great jobs and more secure than, let's say, a marketer or a PM or a project manager or product manager. And so it's pretty interesting how this kind of flipped. And not so much of a flip entirely, but two sides of the same coin versus a slag heap indicating uneducated. And now it's quite the opposite. 1960s and 70s. Oh, this is an interesting one for you guys. The unease extended to white collar professions with technological advancements like ATMs and photocopiers, causing alarm among bank tellers, writers, publishers, and academics. So, first, let's tackle the obvious bank tellers scared of ATMs. We know that we probably like ATMs now rather than a whole line of everybody going to the bank and asking for a certain amount of money, and the bank teller then having to press buttons to remove the money from your account, add the money to the bank, and remove the cash from the bank. Imagine how much harder that would be than automation and how much less convenient that would be. Of course, there would be more bank teller jobs, but people like deli owners couldn't have an ATM machine. Big companies, there couldn't be people walking around, not walking around, but I know individuals who drive around and fill ATMs. They wouldn't have a job. So there's always a flip side to everything. We took the convenience over more workers and more work. 1960s and 70s again. In 1965, Time magazine featured another major story on automation. This time on its cover, The Computer in Society, the articles included a prediction from an economist that automation could lead to reduced work weeks. Isn't that interesting? In 1960s and 70s, they predicted reduced work weeks that are still not here yet. And nowadays, Bill Gates is predicting, and many others are predicting, you could probably find a Forbes article in 2 seconds, that the same thing is going to happen. And of course, I would love to say, and I think this, though I know I'm biased, that this is going to happen sooner than later, but I'm sure people back then said that as well. And so on to the next. Okay, back at it. I was in the bathroom. The 1970s witnessed a significant acceleration in the digital revolution with technological advancements infiltrating various sectors and raising job. I'm not even going to finish it because I'm literally going to say it's the same thing as present day. Chips that kill jobs. What happened the other day? NVIDIA GTC or DTC, whatever, their annual tech conference where they unveiled B200 Blackwell chip, and everyone's saying it's so much better than H100, one of the old chips that were very popular because they helped train AI models. And so now they're saying the same exact thing. The 1980s and 1990s, the 1980s were marked by heightened anxiety over the computer age and advancements in robotics. New York Times was coming up a lot. Maybe they have a trend. Article titled "A Robot is After Your Job" captures this concern. Let's read some of the titles from these articles. Growing technology, shrinking jobs, a limit to full employment. A robot is after your job. Unemployment will end honeymoon with robots. Office workers fear spread of automation. Look at that, everyone. And so now, back then, they didn't have Excel sheets. And now we have Excel sheets, and no one's complaining. No one's like, oh, I miss administrators and the paper filers. I wish they were still here. And no one's saying, oh, maybe a few old heads, but no one's really saying, oh, I miss filing papers. Those are the good old days. I had so much purpose doing that. I was the best paper filer around. You don't hear that much anymore. And I'm glad. Though I wish the job security and the barrier to entry was that low still, I'm very glad that no one is subjected to a life of filing papers. Though there are other jobs now that you can make analogies to, I'm glad that number seemingly is shrinking. And of course, I don't know what I'm talking about. So if you disagree with me, assume that I believe your disagreement. And so let's look at the bottom. In 1995, Jeremy Rifkin published The End of Work, predicting a post-market era characterized by a workless world, suggesting that this trend could erode the foundations of modern society. Isn't that interesting? And I'm sure someone's writing a book right now about the same thing. And as I shared before, though it's on a more positive sentiment, Nick Bostrom recently wrote a similar book called Deep Utopia, talking about post-AGI economics, so on and so forth. Maybe he didn't use that term specifically, and I got that term from David Shapiro, a great YouTuber. And then the title of the article next to the book title is Roots of Crime in a Workless World. And of course, this makes sense at face value. Man, less people are working. Of course, there's going to be more crime. But we can't really predict the future, unfortunately. And though an interesting thing is we're talking about technology that in theory could. 2000s, the dot-com crash and subsequent economic downturn at the turn of millennium, 2000s Y2K, cooled enthusiasm for technology, toned it down. Federal Reserve Chairman Greenspan warned about technology's impact on employment, setting the stage for renewed concerns. 2010s, the rapid development of self-driving technology sparked new fears of unemployment, and we got another robot tax. We got Andrew Yang We got New Yorker articles. We got Newsweek articles. 2020s. With Elon Musk and Tesla advancing relentlessly, as we see, they had the Model 3 manufacturing hell, and then they made it through that, and he makes all these promises that don't come true in time, but they have amazing cars, innovative guy, whether you agree with him or not. I don't agree with everything, but I think he's an ambitious dude, and he gets stuff done. And then let's talk about Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang's 2020 presidential campaign promised universal basic income, UBI, one of the main proponents for this next post AGI economics. I know I'm saying the term a lot, but let me clarify what it means again. Post robots doing as good as they could economy. So whether that means jobs are gone or whether that means we have so many more jobs, the assumption is that most jobs are going to be gone. That's the assumption. Do I know that for sure? No. Does anyone for sure? No, unless they're planning something overhead. Andrew Yang was one of the first people with his little math hat from New York to really emphasize that AI is going to be automating jobs, and we need UBI. We need some sort of $1,000 a month plan in order to keep these people afloat, allow them to maybe work a part-time job to be a little extra comfortable, but work might not have to be forced anymore, and it might have to be encouraged that if you don't want to work, you shouldn't work, give other people opportunities to fill those finite roles. And then this is the last slide. You guys all probably have an idea of everything going on the screen. And if not, you're not a nerd. And that's cool of you. I wish I wasn't. In 2022 and 2023 and 2024, the emergence of generative AI kicked off a new spike in concerns and fascination with the future of unemployment. And then I didn't want to include any fear-mongering titles here or covers because I didn't want to really clickbait you guys. But we got companies like JP Morgan, who initially, when ChatGPT came out, banned ChatGPT from their workers because they were saying they're training on our data, which they are. I'll get into that in a second. And we got some pretty important data and numbers that are confidential. Amazon, same thing. And interestingly, with the Amazon story, so engineers or software engineers or whomever was doing it, or some sort of financial analyst, multiple people were uploading their code or uploading their stats or uploading their sheets to ChatGPT. Well, Sheets wasn't out yet. Uploading data to ChatGPT, getting answers, getting their job done a little easier. And other employees were doing the same thing and figuring out that the model, GPT-3 at the time, was updating itself so fast that they were seeing their coworkers' codes or ideas of campaigns, so on and so forth. So Amazon had to cut it out. And now Amazon's contracting with Anthropic. They just gave them $2.75 billion, which is the closing amount of the $1.25 billion they gave them last year, for a total of $4 billion to really partner with them, because Amazon had this thing called Q, but it didn't really work out really well, and it was only in-house. And then Elon's XAI has Grok. Google has Gemini, formerly Bard. Meta has Llama, now Llama 2. Mistral has Mixtral. And OpenAI, of course, has ChatGPT. They have Dolly, and they have the new voice engine coming out. And so that's all I really wanted to share for this video. I didn't really want to put too much of my insights into here because, one, I'm uneducated. Two, I'm an amateur. Three, I have no idea what I'm talking about. And fourth, this was not the purpose of the video. The purpose of this video was to give you a frame of reference for the past. So peace out, everyone. I'm going to be posting a ton more. And I'm starting a journal club with my boys, John and Hassan, and probably Hazem. So look out for that. We're going to go over articles. We're going to go over papers, so on and so forth.